back one of our committee members who hasn't been able to attend this week. So welcome back, Senator. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, all of you here in the committee meeting room. We do have a full agenda, so we're going to keep on track with using a timer today. And we're going to open the hearing on House Bill 2665, increasing criminal penalties for a driver who leaves the scene of a vehicular accident when the accident results in the death of any person or more than one person if the driver knew or reasonably should have known that such accident resulted in injury or death. And with that, a bill brief from the reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. Jason Thompson, Office of Reviser of Statutes. You have House Bill 2665 and a bill brief in your packet. Procedural background as usual. It was requested for introduction in the House by Mr. Jason Watkins on behalf of Jill Ward. It was referred to the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, who heard and worked the bill, and then passed out of the House on final action 120-0 and made its way over to the Senate. The bill amends one section, KSA 8-1602. That's the statute that makes it criminal conduct to leave the scene of an accident. I outlined the penalties under current law. They range from an unclassified misdemeanor to a Class A person misdemeanor to a severity level 8 person felony, a severity level 6 person felony, and even a severity level 5 person felony, depending on what happens as a result of the accident. The bill keeps all of those current penalties except when death of any person occurs and the driver knew or reasonably should have known that the accident resulted in injury or death. So the current law provision would increase from a severity level 5 to a severity level 4 person felony if one, death occurs and the driver knew or reasonably should have known that the accident resulted in that injury or death. And then a new provision is added when the death of more than one person occurs and the driver knew or reasonably should have known that the accident resulted in injury or death, the penalty would be a severity level 3 person felony. So all the current law penalties are kept intact, except when death occurs, it rises one level from a current law 5 to a 4, and then a new provision for more than one person is killed, that becomes a severity level 3 person felony. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Do we have in statute elsewhere that if more than one person, if the activity results in the death of more than one person, it's a higher level criminal penalty?
Madam Chair, I'm thinking back to when I did the bill draft. I don't recall finding another one like that. I'll look again just to make sure, but I think this one was fairly new.
Actually, wouldn't it be if a pregnant woman is killed? That would be then 2.
It would trigger the Alexa's law provision, and that has its own penalty. So it's almost 2 separate penalties at that point. But let me look. I'll just double check. I don't want to misspeak.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you. I want to also make sure that we keep on time today because due to the Senate having caucuses this morning, some of our 8:30, in fact, all of our 8:30 committees are scheduled to meet at noon today rather than their usual 8:30 time. So I want to be respectful of those committees as well. So we're going to limit conferee testimony to 2 minutes, and I'll have a timer. And when you hear the timer ding, please be respectful and help keep us on track and on time. And we will hear from proponent conferee Chief Daryl Atterbury, Bel Air Police Department. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
I'm Daryl Atterbury, and I'm here representing the Kansas Chiefs of Police, or the Kansas Association Chiefs of Police, Kansas Sheriff's Association, and the Kansas Peace Officers Association. We are proponents of this bill. The perpetrators of these criminal acts leave the scene where they know or should have known somebody was seriously injured or has died. And oftentimes, it's only because of the tenacious work of investigators that we even find out who these people are, because they've taken their vehicles and hidden them. They've tried to flee and hide from us. And it's only after that work that we find out who these people are so that we can then get them charged with these crimes. We support the increases in the penalties because we think that that reflects a good common sense charging of such a severe situation. And mind you, we're not able to do that for the people who have died in these crashes. We're doing it for the families, those left behind. Oftentimes, you'll see in my testimony that people flee the scene of one of these crashes for very minor reasons. They have a driver's license issue. They may have outstanding warrants or think they have outstanding warrants. Maybe they're under the influence of a drug, legal, prescription drugs, illegal drugs, or alcohol. We feel as though, and I've seen in my career, that people, after interviewing them, they feel as though if they hide long enough, they won't be held accountable. And we believe, our associations believe, that this amendment to this bill would do exactly that. We would also ask that you look at the last section on page 2, C, and that's where the director would, it says the director may revoke the license or permit to drive or any non-resident operating privilege of any person or convicted of any of the violations this section. We believe that we would ask for that may to change to will for sections 5 and 6, or number 5 and 6, those more severe penalties. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and save questions until after both proponents. Next, we will hear from proponent conferee Jill Ward, a private citizen. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jill Ward, and I'm here today to talk to you about my only child, Levi, who was killed Easter weekend 2022. Levi was 20 years old, studying meteorology at KU. He was a contract storm chaser with our ABC affiliate, Cake News. His entire life, he has been described as genuine, kind, and polite. I know every parent wants to hear their child described in that manner, but in his 20 years, these were the 3 words repeated to me often, whether they were from a high school teacher, his football buddies, or the person he met 5 minutes ago. Levi and his friend were headed back to his apartment when a truck pulled out in front of them. I have read the accident report and every supporting document relating to the crash. I have watched all 27 body cam videos from the scene of the accident and watched my son die on camera. His friend was transported to the hospital, and I watched him die an hour later on an operating table. The driver of the truck that hit them did not call 911, did not render aid, and left the scene of the accident. His dad brought him back to the scene hours later, dressed in different clothes. The accident report said an open bottle of whiskey was in the driver's side door. He was charged and convicted with leaving the scene of an accident resulting in a fatality. The judge gave him the maximum sentence of 34 months, and he is scheduled to be released in 25 months for killing 2 people. I'm here today to talk about a bill that would revise the Kansas law that governs leaving the scene of an accident resulting in a fatality. We know the main reason people leave the scene of an accident is because they have been driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. If someone is charged with a DUI that resulted in death, that is involuntary manslaughter, which is classified as a level 4, no option of probation, and length of prison sentence increases. The current law incentivizes people driving under the influence to leave the scene, which results in a lesser sentence for them, and more importantly, can result in the death where someone otherwise could have lived. In my son's case, the driver left 2 20-year-old kids on the road to die. What if that had been a school bus of kids? Or think of all the rural counties in our state. If someone is left in critical condition, it could be hours before they are found. Minutes can be the difference between life and death when someone has critical injuries. I want to thank you for your time today. I appreciate you allowing me to tell my story in hopes of educating you on a loophole in the current law. Writing a sales pitch about my son's death is not easy, but necessary. I hope you'll look at the situation and view it as simple and fair change that will help provide accountability under our laws. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll stand for questions when appropriate.
Thank you, Ms. Ward, for sharing your story. I know it takes a lot of courage to, first of all, write it and then be here in public to read it. And we do honestly appreciate you being here, and so sorry for what has happened to your family. So thank you for being here. And with that, then we'll open it up for any questions for Ms. Ward or for the chief. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Gossage.
I know we had a lot of conferees today, Madam Chair, and I'll just make this very short. So you said the first charge is to move, leaving the scene of an accident resulting in a person's death from level 5 to level 4. So what happened to the person that killed your son, basically?
The judge gave him a prison sentence for 34 months for killing both of the individuals.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, other questions? I'm not seeing any, so thank you for being here again, and thank you, Chief, for being here as well. Appreciate it. And committee, want to direct your attention to, there's proponent written only testimony from Bethany Fields from the Kansas County and District Attorney Association. Are there any other conferees wishing to testify as proponents on the bill? Not seeing any. Are there any neutrals or opponent conferees wishing to testify? Not seeing any. Then we will close the hearing on the bill. Thank you very much for being here. Next, we will open the hearing on House Bill 2487, providing immunity from prosecution for certain drug crimes when persons seek or provide medical assistance related to the use of a controlled substance. And with that, a bill brief from the reviser.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Jason Thompson, Revisor's Office. As usual, you have a copy of 2487 and bill brief in your packet. Background, this bill was requested by individual members in the House, Representatives Hoheisel, Alcala, Probst, and Proctor. It was referred to the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, worked there, passed out one time, re-referred, amended a second time, passed back out, and then after final action in the House, passed as amended 120-0 and found its way to the Senate and here today. So the version you have is House Bill 2487 as further amended by House Committee. And it does provide immunity from prosecution for certain drug crimes related to medical assistance. The new section of law there on page 1 is the only provision in the bill. This provides that law enforcement will not take a person into custody for possession of a controlled substance or possession of drug paraphernalia if the law enforcement officer believes the person meets one of 3 criteria. Number 1, that the person initiated contact with law enforcement or emergency medical services and requested assistance on the person's own behalf because they reasonably believe they need medical assistance as a result of the use of a controlled substance, and they cooperate with law enforcement or medical services personnel when they arrive. 2, belief that the person was a person who rendered aid to another who reasonably appeared to need medical assistance as a result of the use of a controlled substance, or was a person who initiated contact with law enforcement or medical services requesting help for someone who reasonably appeared to need that assistance. Those folks also have to provide certain information, relevant information that is necessary to provide the assistance as requested by law enforcement or emergency medical services, remain at the scene until assistance arrives, and cooperate with EMS and law enforcement folks. The third criteria or category would be a person who was the person who appeared to need the medical assistance, and as long as they cooperate with emergency medical services personnel and law enforcement officers, they would also receive the immunity. Subsection B gets into the further criteria here for the immunity. Each person who meets one of those three categories I just mentioned is immune from prosecution for violation of the crime of possession of a controlled substance or the crime of possession of certain drug paraphernalia. I would note that as drafted originally, the paraphernalia provision was all drug paraphernalia, but after the amendment in the House, it is only the subsection that does not relate to methamphetamine precursors. So there was a subsection about paraphernalia related to methamphetamine precursors that is not given immunity here. So wanted to make that clear after the amendment in the House. The section does not apply to a person seeking medical assistance during the execution of an arrest warrant, a search warrant, or other lawful search. And nothing precludes prosecution from other evidence obtained from an independent source. And finally, you're not allowed to initiate an action against law enforcement based on an officer's compliance or failure to comply with the section. Essentially, they're immune unless they have reckless or intentional misconduct. I noted one amendment by the House Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice that was to narrow the paraphernalia crime so that only the non-precursors are immune. The other amendment was done the first time, but then removed the second time. And you'd see that on page 1, there's some bold language that's stricken. And then on page 2, there's some bold language that's stricken. The House Committee on the first action expanded the immunity to violations of probation and parole. And then on reconsideration after referral back to committee, the committee removed those amendments. So it is back to the way it was, immunity only from prosecution, no immunity for violation of parole conditions or probation conditions. And hopefully that clarifies kind of the back and forth in the House side that could get a little confusing. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Not seeing any, then committee, and for our conferees, we do have 10 conferees wishing to testify. So we'll please ask everyone to keep their testimony to 2 minutes. And we do also have an opponent conferee as well. So we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to discuss. So with that, then, do we have, I don't see, oh, do we have Representative Hoheisel here? Not seeing him, but we do have, sorry, I was just going alphabetically, Representative. We do have Representative Pat Proctor here, who represents the 41st District in the Kansas House of Representatives. So please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for hearing this bill. I'm Pat Proctor. I serve the people of Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth, and Kickapoo here in the State House. Providing immunity from drug prosecution is, a pretty drastic measure, but it's a measure that's required because of the crisis that our state's in. We had a Kansas Security Committee meeting in the interim, and the KBI told us, or the KHP told us, they had seized enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the state of Kansas 5 times over. And 60% of the pills that they seized had a lethal dose of fentanyl. And what's so insidious about this epidemic is that most of the people who are overdosing on fentanyl do not know they are taking fentanyl because the pills are marked as Oxycontin or Percocet or something else. I didn't co-sponsor this bill lightly, but I think that the crisis is so severe that we really have to take extraordinary measures to keep people alive until we can stop this flood of fentanyl coming across our borders. And Madam Chair, I'll stop there because I really want you to hear from some of these families that have been impacted by this crisis.
Thank you. And Representative, I understand you are on the floor at 11, so we'll go ahead and entertain any questions for the representative now rather than wait. So are there any questions? Senator Gossage.
Thank you for being here, Representative Proctor, and thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I'm assuming that the reason that you're taking this approach is because if somebody is in a medical crisis or they've taken fentanyl and didn't realize that they did, it's just a matter of a very short period of time before they could die. if they don't die instantly. So we want them to get medical assistance without fear of saying, if I call in, then they'll arrest me. Is that what I'm hearing you
That's
say?
absolutely correct. In Leavenworth, Leavenworth Police Chief told me last year they responded to 48 calls, and 11 of those were fatalities. And frequently, what happens is the people who are with that person when they overdose, they call and they run and they leave that person to die, if they call at all. And so that absolutely is the reason.
I guess the next question is just on behalf of Kansans. If this, so they give medical assistance to this individual or the person who helped, and they don't arrest them, but there's obviously drug use has happened. What happens next with that person? Is there any follow-up? Do we keep a
Well,
record of this?
Yeah, the conditions of the bill are that the people that are with that person and that person will not be prosecuted for that drug crime. My hope is that, you know, that almost dying would be enough to wake a person up and hopefully get help. And that's really what we want, is for these folks to seek help with their addiction.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, other questions? Not seeing, oh, Senator Wilborn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Proctor, thank you for being here. Was there any thought given to how do you communicate that with the public? I mean, this is going to take a while before they understand. Am I being clear?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Senator. This only works if there's also a public information campaign to let people know that, you know, they can call for help. And, the law enforcement, Ed Clump and the law enforcement folks have been involved in this, and they've committed to doing that.
Thank you. Committee, other questions? Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for being here today. So you said that you've talked to your local law enforcement on the number of calls. Did they share with you how many of those calls Narcan was already there and had been administered?
They did not share that. Our police department has just started routinely carrying Narcan, so I would imagine that there wasn't in most of those calls. At least they didn't bring it with them. I don't know if people had it on site at the time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only ask that because in my area, portion that I represent, they are saying that that is now commonplace, that there might be several individuals, they've acquired the drugs, but they have one that doesn't take it, and they're the holder of the Narcan. So just wanting to clarify if you had heard that in your area. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I have heard from the group and saw a presentation, Keeping Clean for Coop, who has provided some written testimony here today. And, it used to be enough perhaps to just say no, but apparently now it's just no, KNOW. So even if this bill were to advance and become law, there's still no safe way to do drugs that you aren't for certain have been prescribed to you and come directly to you from the pharmacy. So I wouldn't want anyone to get the false impression that this provides some ability to safely do illicit drugs that you don't know are coming from the pharmacy. Did you have an opportunity to look at if someone has some Narcan and administers it to their friend who they see might need it? Does this bill provide immunity to the friend administering the Narcan? I think there was a question during the presentation I was at with Keeping Clean for Coop. Do we have any protection for that person?
Now, as far as liability, this bill doesn't really address that. As far as criminal immunity from criminal prosecution, yes, that person would be immune from any prosecution for any user quantity of drugs that they might have on them.
Okay, but not necessarily for administering the Narcan to someone without their permission. Okay, so maybe there's an amendment we might need to look at for that. So potentially. Okay, and with that then, I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much, Representative, for your service and for appearing here in committee today. And I think we get you out in time to be on the floor on time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Appreciate it. Is Representative Hoheisel here, or he might be already across the rotunda on the House floor? But we should have some written testimony in our committee documents and online from Representative Hoheisel as well. Next, we will hear from Ed Clump, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, and Kansas Peace Officers Association. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Ed Clump. I'm here on behalf of the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Peace Officers Association, and collectively we are in strong support of this bill. You have heard me come before this committee talking about issues to address the supply side of this problem. And I want you to know we are also very engaged in the demand side and in taking care of the true victims of these drug crimes, which is the people who are suffering from death and addiction. This law mirrors the minor in possession law that was passed probably 5 or 6 years ago, where we gave immunity to underage people who possessed alcohol when they stayed and helped a person who was suffering from an alcohol overdose. And so much of the provisions of this are mirrored from that law. We think this is a very, very important law to have. If it gets anybody to stay around and give aid, what's really important in this is the cooperation that they give to us and to the other first responders. It is very critical that we act fast in these cases, and we need to identify what's been consumed and what might be the problem with this person having a medical emergency, because many times we get there and we just have a medical emergency. We don't know the cause. And so we laid out 3 things that were very important to us in the bill, and you'll see those listed in the middle of our testimony there. I'm not going to go through all of them for the sake of time. All of those are important to us. And Senator Baumgartner, you asked a question about the Narcan availability. Just recently, you may know this, that Narcan was made a non-prescription availability. So we look to see that availability being very much more widespread now, just by common people engaged in these activities and around these activities, or have a loved one that engages in these activities. So we expect that. And Senator Warren, you asked about the civil immunity. There's actually a separate statute covering Narcan, and in that there is some level of immunity for civil. I don't remember how that plays out towards now that it's non-prescription, but that is covered in a statute already for a person that administers Narcan to a person suffering from one of these. And of course, the beauty about Narcan is it is not harmful, even if the person isn't suffering from a fentanyl overdose. It has no ill effects. So when in doubt, we usually apply the Narcan first and see if we get a response from that. So, Madam Chair, I'll stand for questions. I'm sure I'm using my 2 minutes.
Thank you. And we will reserve questions till all the conferees. So thank you. Next, we will hear from Stuart Little, Behavioral Health Association of Kansas. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stuart Little, Behavioral Health Association of Kansas. I'm going to be quick. You're going to hear from a lot of folks that have much more important experiences to talk about. I represent an organization of drug and alcohol treatment providers across the state. We're supportive of this because I think Senator Gossage raised the question about, you're in this setting, what do you do at this point? And I think that this is a great opportunity where folks can get a referral to services from law enforcement. I'm not suggesting that gets written in here. We don't need to have everything in this, but that'll be an opportunity when there's that contact in that situation, and that there could be a referral to treatment. And we think that's an important component of this bill overall. I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Chrissy Mayor, Chief Community-Based Services Officer, DCCCA.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you. My name is Chrissy Mayor, and I'm the Chief Community-Based Services Officer at DECA. We have a strong background in substance use disorder prevention and treatment services. So I'm here today on behalf of DECA to support this bill because it will save the lives of Kansans. This bill will ensure that anyone who is with a person experiencing an overdose will administer naloxone if available, call for medical assistance, and remain with the individual without fear of prosecution. In 2022, an average of 62 people died each month from an overdose death. Nearly 11% of those deaths, a bystander was present. Among the deaths with a bystander present, nearly 90% provided no response. Passage of this bill would empower bystanders to respond. DECA has operated the Kansas naloxone program since August of 2020. During that time, I've had the opportunity to connect with individuals and organizations who have used our services. I can confidently say our naloxone program has saved lives. Based on feedback we've received, we estimate that naloxone kits from our agency have saved nearly 300 Kansans. Through our program, we've had many individuals reach out and ask how laws can be changed to protect someone who is trying to help during an overdose situation. The fear of consequences when calling 911 sometimes prevent action, resulting in a very preventable death. In the 48 states and jurisdictions that have enacted Good Samaritan laws, studies found an increase in the likelihood of individuals calling 911 if they are aware of the laws. However, awareness of the laws does vary across jurisdictions, which may impact the willingness to call 911. Through our naloxone program, DECA has an opportunity to increase awareness and educate individuals about the importance of calling 911 when naloxone and ensuring naloxone is administered without fear of prosecution. We strongly encourage passage of this bill to ensure that anyone who is with a person experiencing an overdose will be empowered to save a life. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Christy Shirley. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you. My name is Christy Shirley, and I'm a grieving mother on a mission to save lives. On February 17th, 2023, I got a call that no parent wants to get. She was not hurt. Her diabetes wasn't acting up. She didn't want food or snacks. Cheyenne Ray McCombs, was deceased. No longer with us, her life taken too soon by fentanyl poisoning. Cheyenne was bright, beautiful, smart, and funny. She was only 20 years old. She not only left behind parents and 3 siblings, but also leaves behind her baby girl, Stella, who is about to turn 2. We are broken and grief-stricken. After meeting with the detective on the case, and getting autopsy and toxicology reports, we found out Cheyenne was in a basement for hours before anyone called for help. In a house full of people, she was left lying there to die. Everyone scattered, scared for whatever reason, too scared to call for help. I wasn't there, so I can't say for sure, but I believe this law would have helped save our sweet girl. She may have had the chance to live. Since Cheyenne's passing, I have learned much more about fentanyl epidemic. I have met so many families that have been through the same thing. My hopes and prayers are that this law be passed and in turn can possibly save thousands of lives. There is addiction all over the state of Kansas. It's not just fentanyl. This law can bring confidence and awareness that if someone is in active overdose, it is safe to call for help. It is safe to do everything you can to save them. I will never stop working within my community to bring awareness, Narcan test strips, free information, and helping resources. However, nothing would make my grieving heart feel more better than being a part of something so big such as the Good Samaritan overdose law. I want to thank you for the chance to give a testimony today and your kindness and consideration to help us make a difference in the state of Kansas. A grief-stricken mother.
Thank you. And on behalf of the committee, thank you for being here and sharing your story. And I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sure it's very difficult to be sharing not just your story, but here in public as well. So thank you for sharing, and we'll go ahead and hold for any questions till all the conferees have had an opportunity. Thank you. And next, we will hear from Ashley Richie. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Richie. Today I come before you as a recovering addict, a mother who fought through the foster care system, a recovery advocate, someone who has buried several people close to me to this epidemic, and as someone who has served as an RN in a Kansas substance abuse treatment center for over 5 years. I got clean in 2016. After getting clean and bringing my children home, I buried my dad to this disease in 2017. I'd promised him that I'd do 2 things, stay clean and achieve my childhood dream of becoming a nurse, so that's exactly what I did. I found the perfect place for me inside a Kansas Drug and Alcohol Rehabilitation Center. And through the last few years of my career, I have looked into the eyes of this fentanyl epidemic, and to be honest, the word itself is scary. Our children, our schools, our communities, and our people are being poisoned. When I think of this bill, I think of our communities and our children. It's a scary thought to think that one of our own children or grandchildren might be faced with a very difficult decision by simply attending prom or a senior party. Can you imagine being a senior in high school and one of your friends collapses and stops breathing? Can you be certain you would know exactly what to do? Would you think about it for 3 to 4 minutes before being able to make that decision? Now imagine that same scenario and having the rest of the marijuana you two just smoked out back together in your pocket. Would you think it a little longer? I know I'd like to say that I wouldn't hesitate and I would call 911 immediately, but I honestly can't be sure what I would have done with no education or knowledge as to what was happening. People experiencing fentanyl poisoning don't have minutes. They don't have minutes for us to think. After 4 short minutes, the brain begins to lose oxygen, and between 4 to 6 minutes, the entire body shuts down, causing death. In the state of Kansas, first responders have to legally respond to a call and be en route within 5 minutes after being radioed. But with rural counties such as mine, help can take anywhere from 5 to 25 minutes and probably even longer if the weather is unsafe. Time is of essence, and we need to get these people to help as quickly as possible. One of my friends shared a story with me when we were talking about me being here today. She shared that she'd been put in a similar situation before. Fear is what held her back from making that call immediately, and fear will be what continues to stop people from calling 911 and or delaying the call if we don't pass this bill in Kansas. The stigma behind addiction has got to take a backseat when it comes to this bill. I won't get into how I feel about the stigma behind addiction today because we all know it's there, but what I will say is this epidemic is no longer affecting just the typical drug addict, whom also deserves saving. But this drug is being passed in our schools and our communities. It does not discriminate. I stand here today with and for the broken families who have lost their loved ones to this epidemic, ones that didn't deserve to die, asking you to set your bias aside in order to save lives. As a nurse in a substance abuse treatment center here in the state of Kansas, I can tell you that I've seen firsthand that fentanyl is now being found laced into several different drugs, including marijuana. These people are not trying to die, and we've got to start doing what we can in order to combat this epidemic. And I believe that this is the correct next step in aiding in the efforts to fight the fentanyl epidemic in the state of Kansas.
Thank you for being here today to share your personal story. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we will hear from James Cobb-Lewis. I apologize for not probably pronouncing your last name correctly, but you'll correct me. Please go ahead and introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
My name is James Cobb-Lewis Jr., and I want to start by thanking you for your time and thanking you for giving me a chance to speak about why I think this bill is important. I'm a recovering addict, and I never thought I'd be the person standing here before you today. I've been in many situations that I'm not proud of. One particular thing I would like to speak about today. Many years ago during my active addiction, I found myself in a situation where a friend of my girlfriend was at our hotel room and she overdosed. I panicked and didn't know what to do. I called the police. I knew if I called the police, I was going to go to jail because I had drugs on me. I finally had my girlfriend take her to the closest gas station and call 911. This is something I'm very ashamed of. It's not the person I am today. I am disgusted that I was more concerned with me staying out of jail than the safety of this woman. Had this law been in place, I know I would have called 911. I know that because I'm not a bad person. I made a bad decision for fear of being arrested. I believe this law will change things. People in active addiction find themselves in bad situations sometimes. And if they know that they are safe to call 911, they will stay and help the person instead of sending them away or not calling. I know this because that's what I would have done. I feel so awful for the choice that I made, and it saddens me, especially when I meet the people who are directly affected by this. But I am not that person now. I acted out of fear. Today, I serve my community by actively volunteering with local organizations to share awareness and education as well as harm reduction items. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story.
Thank you. And the committee thanks you for sharing your very personal story here with us today. Thank you. Committee, we will next hear from Amber Sailberger. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Hi, my name's Amber Berger. I've lost 4 to fentanyl in the last year and a half. Sorry. We lost our daughter 6 months ago. But the 2 that I want to speak about today, what are my sister-in-law, Monica Berger, and my son-in-law, David Carr Jr. David was 16 years old, and he took a pill that he believed to be a Percocet. He was in a room surrounded by friends that were also partying with him, and they were afraid to call 911 because they were afraid of going to jail. They all left him for too long, and now I'm raising his 2-year-old son who will never get the opportunity to speak to his father or to know him personally. All he'll know is the stories that we're able to tell him. My sister-in-law, Monica Berger, leaves behind 3 kids. She was 36 years old, and all they have now is memories. They don't get to hear her contagious laugh or see any of the good that she actually did. She was also in a situation where she took something that she believed to be a Xanax, and it was laced with fentanyl, illicit fentanyl, and all of her friends were there, and they were afraid because they all had drugs or drug paraphernalia on them, and they took too long to clean the scene, and they all left, and finally someone got the nerve to call 911, but they left. They wouldn't stay with her. I believe had this law been in place for both of those situations, they would both be here raising their children. Since we lost our daughter, we have gone full force against educating the community and passing out Narcan and fentanyl test strips because those people deserve a chance at life. They deserve to know that they have something to offer the community and to offer the world. No mother should ever have to go through what a lot of these mothers are going through, including myself. But if this law had been in place, I believe that so many lives could have been saved. And if it's passed, so many lives will be saved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you again for sharing your personal story and your tragedy. And the committee thanks you for being here, and we're sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, next we will hear from Mory N Nell on behalf of herself and Mitzi Groves. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mory N Nell. My place of residence is Overland Park. I am a doctor of pharmacy, a licensed pharmacist, and a clinical professor. My current position is at the University School of Pharmacy. I've been there for 25 years. As part of my academic appointment, I practice in patient care collaboratively with physicians and healthcare professional students at a medical education clinic in the areas of internal medicine and chronic pain. I'm here today because Dr. Mitzi Groves had hoped to testify, but unfortunately she's out of the country. So I wanted you to hear her story as well as add a few comments of mine. You have her testimony in writing, so I'm going to try to highlight to be respectful of time. But to tell you a little bit about Mitzi, she lives in Stillwell, Kansas. She has a son, Grayson, who's 20 years old. He was very successful in high school and was doing well in college until he had a seizure. And after not being able to discover what was going on, his roommate called his parents and told him that he had a drug problem. They were totally surprised about this. They immediately put him in a 30-day intensive outpatient program. They thought he was doing well. I'll read specifically from her testimony. On the evening of July 3rd, 2023, my husband, on his way to bed, heard noises from Grayson's room. He woke me up. We found Grayson unresponsive. He was dying before our eyes. We called 911. I administered Narcan and sterile rubs. The ambulance and police arrived. Grayson regained consciousness within a few minutes of arrival. Their family was one of the lucky ones. Thanks to DECA and your funding of this program to provide free Narcan, we are one of the families you saved. That night, as Grayson was being taken to the hospital in an ambulance, the police told us that they would be issuing a warrant for Grayson's arrest due to drug possession. They said it typically takes about 6 months, but that they wanted us to be aware. We were too traumatized at that moment by his near-death experience to ask any questions. Grayson was admitted to inpatient rehab, and just recently, within the last few months, actually within the last few weeks, 3 police cars and 6 police officers arrived at their front door. They handcuffed my son and took him to jail. They booked him and charged him with a Class 5 felony for drug possession and set bond at $2,500. We posted bond for him, but then found out we were listed as a no contact until the court case was settled. We are part of his support system in recovery. We are his home. Both are elements important to recovery. Now, because we called 911 for life-saving help, he may become a felon. There are ramifications of being arrested, and these are long-standing and do not encourage sobriety. Mitzi also says that Kansas isn't behind. We are one of only 2 states that continue to prosecute drug overdoses. This is a tragedy on top of tragedy. She urges you to pass this bill. Thank you for allowing me to read some highlights. I do have some additional comments. Just 2 days ago, I was in class teaching pharmacy students about Narcan. This is free Narcan that I got from DECA as well. I taught students about, and the brand name is naloxone, or generic name is naloxone. I taught students about recognizing signs of overdoses, how to teach the community and the public, and to recognize overdoses and be able to recommend it. One statistic I shared with the class is that the Centers for Disease Control reports that nearly 40% of opioids and stimulant overdose deaths occur while a bystander is present. I suspect that's even higher in Kansas. Increasing the availability of naloxone and educating the public is clearly important, but all of those steps will be lost in the critical situation of life or death if someone is hesitant because of fear from prosecution. This bill will save lives. I also want to address that because of naloxone.
We're a little over time, so.
I just want to say because of naloxone, this house, but people need to be transported. Fentanyl is long acting, so just 2 doses out of here don't necessarily save a life as well. And that then links people to be able to get the help that they need as well. So thank you for listening to my and Mitzi's testimony. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here, and we appreciate sharing and hearing the story that you bring today. Are there any other conferees wishing to testify as proponents on the bill? Not seeing any, then committee, do we have any questions? Not seeing any questions, then we will direct your attention to, there are written documents in your committee folders and online from proponent conferees. Representative Jason Probst, he's a Kansas State Representative representing the 102nd District. Kimberly Martin, Kansas School Nurse Association. Aaron Atterbury, Policy Chair, Kansas Public Health Association. Tim DeWeese, Director, Johnson County Mental Health Center. Kansas Department of Health and Environment and Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services. Lisa K. Veda, RPH MSMA. Emily Brandt, BIDS Legislative Committee. Valerie Beam, private citizen. Dustin Hare, Wyandotte County Health Department Policy Analyst. Andy Burris, Cruz for Life Foundation. Libby Davis, Keep and Clean for Coop. Jennifer Ebert, private citizen. Jonathan Smith, MH, Executive Director, Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. Mindy Cox, private citizen. And Kelly Garner, private citizen as well. Do we have any conferees wishing to testify as neutral on the bill? Not seeing any, then we will invite opponent conferee Nicholas Riner to the podium. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Nicholas Riner from Inman, Kansas, and I'm opponent to this bill as it is written. Please do not see my opponent position as a lack of compassion or empathy for those who have lost loved ones, but I believe this represents a Band-Aid on bigger issues like what we even call crime. Now, the law enforcement lobbyist, how much time do I have? Is it 2 minutes or?
2 minutes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
The law enforcement lobbyist says that the last thing that they want to happen is for people to be left to die. But the support from the organized law enforcement organizations are hinged on language that I believe dilute the bill. And if law enforcement is making the law instead of enforcing it, there is by default kind of an automatic bias. Now, we know and have heard other previous testimony that we can't arrest our way out. But we should also consider when to arrest and move from an attitude of just don't tell us when we can't arrest. So there also needs to be some prioritization and recognition of dual state sovereignty, fix our system of what we call crime, bonding and sentencing, but that's other issues. Just specifics on the bill. Section 1A, with the language that they've taken out, birds of a feather flock together, whether you go into the coffee shop and you're drinking legal addictive stimulants, or if you're at a drug house doing drugs. So people that are in violation of conditions of probation, possibly have a urine test to do or other things, you're taking that out. So they're still going to be living with fear of being prosecuted for those violations and may not call somebody. So that dilutes it there. The number of persons in A2, I believe, was changed to a person instead of 4 persons. There's still some issues with that. And then on the second page, B, well, the language that was taken out against manufacturing and distribution, one of these things is not like the other. So the planting and the potting soil and the containers like that, does that include in there? And then, of course, the quantity issues. Are we expecting the public to say, hey, Bill, how much of that fentanyl do you have on you? Is it a felony amount? Well, then we can't call 911 then. And then also the rebuttable presumption language in B2, I believe, if I'm reading right, in page 2, lines 21. So the rebuttable presumption deal, I think, would relieve the prosecutor of the burden of proof, whereas maybe need to have adverse inference. So like I said, I'm opposed. I wish that we would call crime and treat it like crime. And if we want to have immunity, we should not call crime. And so that's my basis for being an opponent to this bill, and I'll stand for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Are there any other conferees wishing to testify as opponent to the bill? Not seeing any, then we will go ahead and open it up for any questions from the committee. Not seeing any, then thank you for your testimony, Mr. Riner, and appearing here today in front of the committee. With that, then, before we close the hearing on the bill, just want to again thank those who came and shared very personal stories in public. Regardless of the subject, that's often a difficult thing to do. So thank you for being here at the State House today to do that. With that, then, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2487. And committee, we do have just a few minutes if we could make sure that if you have amendments on bills that we have previously heard, please make sure that you get those ready. We are not planning to meet tomorrow or Monday, but we will meet planning on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, possibly Friday next week, and possible final action on bills previously heard those days. So I want to make sure everyone has their amendments ready if you have those. And bringing them to the chair ahead of time is also a good idea. So with that, then, I want to make sure our members can get to the unusual event of having noon committees today because of caucus for both parties at 8 a.m. this morning. And with that, then, want to thank staff, committee, conferees, and those in the committee meeting room and following online for joining us here today. With that, then, the meeting is adjourned.